If you're over 60, some of what you own right now is quietly costing you your retirement. Not just money, time, energy, flexibility, peace of mind. Most retirement advice talks about saving more, investing better, delaying Social Security. Almost none of it talks about this, the things you are holding on to that are holding you back. Today, I'm going to walk you through 5 specific things that many of the happiest retirees sell or let go of, and why they never once regret it. I will also give you a 3-question filter at the midpoint of this video that you can apply to anything in your life before making a decision. Stay with me, because the 5th item is the hardest to let go of. It does not have a price tag, and it may be the most important thing on this entire list. Here is a pattern that shows up consistently among people who transition into retirement well. They do not just optimize what they have, they simplify what they carry. The retirees who report the highest satisfaction are almost never the ones with the most assets. They are the ones who figured out, often earlier than their peers, that after 60, what you own starts owning you. That every possession you keep requires a piece of your attention, your budget, your energy, and your mental space. And in retirement, those resources become finite in a way they were not when you were earning a full salary. Think about what that actually means in practice. When you were 45, earning a full income, a maintenance problem at the house was an inconvenience. You called someone. You wrote a check. You moved on. When you're 68 and your retirement income is fixed, that same maintenance problem is a financial event. It competes with travel, with grandchildren, with the medical expenses that are now a permanent line item in your budget. The money feels different because the context is different. This video is not about deprivation. It is not about selling everything you love. It is not about becoming minimalist as a philosophy or a lifestyle identity. It is about identifying the specific things that once served your old life. The commuting years, the full house years, the accumulation years, and that are now quietly taxing the retirement you worked decades to reach. There's a difference between what you own and what owns you. By the end of this video, you will know exactly which category each major asset in your life falls into. Let's begin with the one that almost always creates the biggest single financial change. 8 out of every 10 Americans over 65 are living in homes with at least one unused spare bedroom. 8 out of 10. That is according to an analysis of U.S. Census data by senior housing economist Chris Salviati, and it represents 17% of all owner-occupied housing in the country. That house was not always oversized. And when you bought it, or when you built your life in it, it fit. It held a family. It held noise and chaos and kids growing up and years that mattered. Now it holds those memories and a lot of empty rooms that cost real money to heat, cool, insure, maintain, and repair. Let's talk about what this actually costs. According to Bankrate's research using data from Thumbtack and Hippo Insurance, the average American homeowner now spends $8,800 a year on home maintenance alone. That number includes routine upkeep, landscaping, gutter cleaning, minor plumbing, appliance maintenance. It does not include the category-changing repair events that happen in aging homes. A new roof runs between $8,000 and $15,000, depending on size and material. An HVAC replacement is typically $5,000 to $10,000. A kitchen remodel that a realtor recommends before listing can run anywhere from $20,000 to $60,000. These are not rare events. In a home that is 30 or 40 years old, the age of most boomer family homes, these are scheduled expenses waiting for a date on the calendar. And there's the broader cost structure on top of maintenance. Property taxes on a 4-bedroom home in most suburban markets run between $4,000 and $12,000 annually. Homeowners insurance on a larger home typically runs $1,200 to $3,000 per year. Utilities for a home sized for a family of 4 or 5, now occupied by 1 or 2 people, can run $1,000 to $2,000 per month in heating and cooling seasons. Here is a real-world scenario worth sitting with. Consider a couple. Call them Gary and Ellen. They raised 3 kids in a 4-bedroom colonial in the suburbs. Their youngest left 6 years ago. When they finally sat down and did the honest accounting, mortgage, property taxes, utilities, insurance, maintenance, and the 2 weekends a month Gary spent keeping the place up. They were carrying over $24,000 a year in total housing costs. They loved the neighborhood. They did not need to leave it. They sold the colonial, paid off all remaining mortgage with the equity, bought a 2-bedroom condo 3 miles away, and walked out of closing with over $200,000 in freed equity, plus reduced annual housing costs of roughly $9,000. $9,000 a year back into their budget, $15,000 in annual savings compared to what they had been spending. And Gary got his weekends back. Now consider what that freed equity and those annual savings mean in retirement terms. $200,000 invested at a conservative 4% annual return generates $8,000 per year in additional income. Add the $15,000 annual savings and housing costs, And Gary and Ellen effectively created $23,000 per year in financial improvement, simply by moving 3 miles. That is not a small adjustment. That is a transformation of their retirement arithmetic. And beyond the money, there is the issue of what happens when the house becomes unmanageable. According to AARP research, nearly 80% of adults over 50 want to remain in their homes as they age. That is understandable, but the physical reality of a large multi-story home changes as mobility changes. Stairs that were irrelevant at 50 become a daily negotiation at 75. The yard that you took pride in becomes a liability when maintaining it exceeds your physical capacity. The house that gave you independence can quietly become the thing that traps you, or forces a rushed decision at the worst possible time, when health rather than strategy is driving the choice. The people who downsize strategically, on their own timeline, from a position of choice rather than necessity, almost universally report feeling that they did it too late. They rarely wish they had waited longer. 61% of baby boomers say they do not plan to sell their homes, according to a 2025 survey by Clever Real Estate. And for many of them, that is genuinely the right call. Some homes are not oversized. Some locations are deeply tied to community, family, and meaning in ways that transcend the financial calculation. Some people have already done the work of adapting their home for aging in place, and the numbers work. But for a significant portion of that group, the decision is not really financial. It is emotional. They are keeping a home that served a chapter of life that is over and paying every single month to maintain a past that no longer exists. The question worth asking, honestly, is this: does this house serve the life I'm actually living right now, or the life I used to live? If the answer requires you to pause, that pause is important information. According to AOA's 2025 Year Driving Cost Study, the average total annual cost of owning and operating a new vehicle in the United States is $11,577. That is not a typo, nearly $12,000 a year, every year. Depreciation alone accounts for $4,334 of that, money that simply evaporates whether the car is driven or parked. Now ask yourself one question: when did you last commute? For most people at or near retirement, the car that once justified itself through 5 days a week of necessity is now a car that makes 2 or 3 trips per week to a grocery store, a doctor's appointment, and the occasional lunch with a friend. The second car in the driveway, the one that made sense when you had 2 different work schedules, 2 separate professional lives running in parallel, may now be a liability dressed as a convenience. Let's look at the full cost picture. Insurance for a second vehicle typically adds between $800 and $2,000 to your annual premium, depending on the make, model, and your record. Registration fees vary by state, but average between $150 and $450 annually. Maintenance and repairs, oil changes, tires, brake work, the unexpected, average around $1,200 per year for a vehicle in regular use, and only slightly less for one sitting idle. Idle vehicles develop their own maintenance problems: battery drain, tire flat spots, gasket deterioration, fuel system issues from sitting. Combine insurance, registration, maintenance, and depreciation, and a second car that sees limited use costs the average household between $4,000 and $8,000 per year, depending on the vehicle's age, type, and condition. Now translate that into retirement language. At a standard 4% withdrawal rate from a retirement portfolio, maintaining a $4,000 annual expense requires $100,000 in retirement savings to sustain it. An $8,000 annual expense requires $200,000 in savings to cover indefinitely without depleting principal. That second car in your driveway, the one you use a few times a week at most, is equivalent to carrying between $100,000 and $200,000 in extra retirement savings burden. Most people have never framed it that way. Most people think of the second car in terms of the payment they used to make, not the total cost they are still carrying. Before you dismiss this, here's the test worth taking. For 60 days, pretend you only have one car. Do not sell it yet. Just act as if you already did. Plan your errands around one vehicle. Coordinate schedules. See what adjustments you actually need to make. See how often that second car was truly essential versus how often it was simply there. Many couples who run this test are genuinely surprised. The second car turns out to be a buffer for a scheduling conflict that arises perhaps once or twice a month. A conflict that, in the era of rideshare services available in virtually every American city, costs perhaps $20 or $30 to solve when it actually occurs. That is $240 to $360 a year in rideshare charges, to solve a problem you have been spending $4,000 to $8,000 a year to avoid. Now, if you live rurally, if public transit is genuinely not an option, if your health situations require independent vehicle access for medical reasons, keep both cars. This is not a universal directive. It is an invitation to examine an assumption that many retirees have never questioned because the second car arrived during a life chapter when it was entirely justified, and then simply stayed. there is also a safety dimension that deserves honest acknowledgement. As driving ability changes with age, and for most people it does, whether through vision changes, reaction time, medication effects, or simple fatigue, having two cars does not double your transportation security. What doubles your transportation security is having a plan for the years when driving becomes difficult or impossible. A financial cushion funded in part by the proceeds and savings from a vehicle you no longer truly need is a far more resilient strategy than a second car that both of you are holding on to out of habit. There's a specific kind of possession that shows up in almost every retirement story. The expensive acquisition that was once pure joy and has quietly become a source of guilt, cost, and obligation. Let us be specific about what this category includes. The RV bought for the retirement road trip that went out twice in 3 years and has been sitting in a storage facility ever since, costing between $300 and $800 per month in storage fees alone, plus insurance, registration, and the annual cost of keeping a vehicle with an engine and a fuel system from deteriorating in place. The boat that gets used 4 weekends a summer and sits the rest of the year, costing between $1,500 and $4,000 per month in marina fees, storage, insurance, maintenance, and registration. A study by the National Marine Manufacturers Association found that the average boat owner uses their vessel approximately 25 to 30 days per year. At even conservative total annual ownership costs of $12,000, that is $400 to $480 per day on the water. The vacation home that was supposed to be a retreat and became a second set of bills, a second set of repairs, a second relationship with a property management company or a rental platform, and a second weekend dedicated to management instead of rest. According to data from the National Association of Realtors, the average second home owner spends between $15,000 and $25,000 per year on carrying costs, mortgage interest, property taxes, insurance, maintenance, and management fees, before factoring in the time cost of remote ownership. The collection built with genuine passion over 20 years, cars, guitars, motorcycles, art, watches, vintage items, that now requires storage, insurance, climate control, or periodic maintenance that you no longer have the same energy or enthusiasm to provide. These things were not mistakes when you acquired them. They represented something real: aspiration, identity, hard work, earned reward. A boat is not just a boat. It is the version of yourself who had the resources and the freedom to own one. It is summer Saturday mornings on the water. It is a dream that finally became real. The problem is not that you bought them. The problem is that you may be keeping them for who you were rather than who you are now. Here's a pattern that repeats with notable consistency. Someone has a collection of 5 of something. 5 classic cars, 5 guitars, 5 motorcycles. When you sit down and ask them honestly, 1 or 2 of those items they still genuinely love, actively use, and would miss deeply if they were gone. The rest are being maintained out of inertia. They have not driven that 3rd car in 18 months. They have not played that 4th guitar since they finished a project 2 years ago. The items are not joy anymore. They are obligation wearing the costume of identity. And the financial cost is real. 5 classic cars, each requiring insurance, storage, and occasional maintenance, can easily carry an annual cost of $15,000 to $30,000 for a collection that delivers perhaps 60 hours of genuine enjoyment per year. When you calculate the per-hour cost of that enjoyment, it would be cheaper to rent a Ferrari for a weekend whenever the mood strikes, and spend the rest of the year with the money back in your portfolio. That is not the right framework for things you deeply love, but it is exactly the right framework for things you're keeping out of guilt, nostalgia, or because you have not yet given yourself permission to let go. The framework here is not sell everything. It is keep what you genuinely love, keep the one that still gives you real joy, real use, real identity, let go of the rest, and let someone who will actually use and love those things carry both the joy and the cost of ownership instead. You do not have to be the museum curator of your own past. You are allowed to travel light into this chapter of your life. There is also a quality of life dimension beyond the financial one that is worth naming directly. When you own fewer things, you think about fewer things. The mental overhead of ownership, the low-grade background awareness that something needs attention, that something is depreciating, that something in storage is developing a problem you will eventually have to deal with, does not feel heavy until you release it, and then the relief is often startling. People who simplify significantly in the years before and after retirement consistently describe the same experience. They expected to miss the things they let go of and instead felt lighter. Not empty, lighter. Like putting down a bag they had carried so long they had stopped noticing the weight. Before we get to the final 2 items, which are the most emotionally complex on this entire list, I want to give you a simple framework you can apply to anything in your life right now. 3 questions. If you answer them honestly, they will tell you what to keep and what to release. Question 1, does this still serve my new life, or only my old one? Not the life of 35 or 50 or the commuting full house accumulation years, The life you're actually living right now, or the life you are actively building toward? If the honest answer is old life, that is a signal worth paying attention to. It does not mean you must let it go. It means you should look at it clearly, with both eyes open, and make a decision rather than drift into one. Question 2, what is this truly costing me each year? Not the payment, not the vague sense of expense, the total, honest, full accounting cost, maintenance, insurance, storage, taxes, time, mental bandwidth, and the opportunity cost of what that capital could do elsewhere in your retirement portfolio. Most people have never calculated this number for the major things they own. They know what they paid. They may know what they owe. They almost never know the full annual carrying cost. And that number is almost always meaningfully larger than their intuition suggested. Question 3. If I let this go, what becomes possible? This is the question that moves people from scarcity thinking to clarity thinking. Not what do I lose? What opens up? What stress quietly disappears from the edges of your life? What money returns to flexibility? What version of your retirement becomes available on the other side of this one decision? Run anything through those 3 questions before you decide, and bring particular care to the next 2 items, because these are the ones where the financial cost is largest and the emotional resistance is strongest. I want to be very careful and very honest about how I say this, because I understand the instinct behind it deeply, and I'm not here to judge it. Helping your children is one of the most natural things a parent can do. It comes from love. It comes from strength. It comes from a desire to smooth a path you know is genuinely hard, because you walked a version of it yourself. But here is the data, and it cannot be ignored. According to a 2025 study by Savings.com, 50% of American parents with adult children are currently providing them with financial support. The average monthly amount is $1,474. Let that number land for a moment. $1,474 per month. That is $17,688 per year, flowing from a parent's retirement resources to an adult child's present-day expenses. The same study found that working parents who support their adult children are contributing more than twice as much money each month to their children as they are to their own retirement accounts. More than twice as much. A 2025 survey by Ameriprise Financial found that 36% of parents worry that financially supporting their adult children could meaningfully impact their retirement plans. And a Bankrate survey found that 61% of parents with adult children have made or are currently making financial sacrifices for their kids, with 37% of those sacrifices specifically involving retirement savings. Let's translate the numbers into the retirement math they represent. $1,474 per month is $17,688 per year. At a 4% withdrawal rate from a retirement portfolio, sustaining that level of support requires approximately $442,000 in retirement savings allocated entirely to supporting an adult child. $442,000. That is not a rounding error. That is not a minor financial adjustment. That is potentially the difference between a retirement that works and a retirement that runs short. And the money, while significant, is not the only cost. There is the stress cost. When your financial support of an adult child becomes routine, expected, structural, built into how they live, it creates a dynamic that reshapes the parent-child relationship in ways that are rarely discussed honestly. The adult child, however much they love their parent, often feels both grateful and diminished by the ongoing dependency. The parent, however much they love their child, often feels both compelled and quietly resentful of a support arrangement that has no natural endpoint. There is the opportunity cost. Every dollar flowing to an adult child is a dollar not compounding in your retirement portfolio, not building your emergency reserve, not funding the travel or the experiences or the healthcare access that your own retirement requires. And there is what I think of as the reversal risk. Here's what nobody says at the kitchen table when these conversations happen. There are loans available for almost everything your adult children need. Student loans for education, mortgages for first homes, small business loans for entrepreneurial ventures, personal loans for bridging periods between jobs. Your children have access to credit that spans decades of future earning capacity. They have time horizons of 30 and 40 and 50 years to build financial stability. There are no retirement loans. There is no borrowing against your 70-year-old future self. There's no mechanism for catching up on retirement savings that were redirected for years or decades to someone else's present-day comfort. Social Security is fixed once you claim it. A depleted retirement portfolio does not regenerate on goodwill. The cruelest version of this story, and it plays out more than anyone wants to acknowledge, is the parent who sacrificed retirement security to help an adult child, only to eventually become financially dependent on that same child later in life. It transforms an act of love into a burden placed on the very person they were trying to protect. It trades their child's financial difficulty at 28 for their child's financial burden at 50. If you can afford to help your adult children without impacting your retirement, by all means do it. Generosity is one of the great privileges of having built something. Watching your children build good lives with your support is genuinely one of the most meaningful experiences of later parenthood. But if you're routinely choosing your children's financial comfort over your own retirement security, if the support is structural rather than occasional, if it is driven by their expectation rather than your abundance, if you have not had the honest conversation about what you can genuinely afford, that is not generosity. That is a transaction with compounding costs that you and your children will both pay at a later date when the options are narrower. The conversation worth having is not, how much do I give? The conversation worth having is, what is the honest, sustainable, genuinely loving amount that I can give without compromising the financial independence that allows me to never become a burden on the family I love? That is, if you think about it carefully, the most generous thing a parent over 60 can do. Protect your retirement not for your own comfort, but so that your children never have to carry you. There's also a behavioral dimension to this that financial research consistently surfaces. Financial support that removes the pressure to build self-sufficiency does not always help adult children in the long run. The difficulty of navigating financial hardship, of learning to budget under constraint, of building the discipline that comes from needing to make it work, these experiences build capability. Removing them entirely, while it may reduce short-term distress, can deprive adult children of the development that only comes from being genuinely responsible for their own lives. The most financially capable adults in their 30s and 40s are rarely the ones whose parents removed every obstacle. They are the ones who were loved, supported emotionally and directionally, and then trusted to find their own way through the hard parts. That is not indifference. That is one of the deeper forms of parental confidence. For 30, maybe 40 years, your work has been one of the primary ways you answered the question, who am I? Your title, your role, your area of expertise, the problems only you knew how to solve, the team that called you when something went wrong, the Monday morning that gave you structure, purpose, urgency, and a place in the world. And now you're being asked, or you're asking yourself, to step away from all of that, to close the laptop one final time, to hand off the responsibilities, to walk out of a building that organized your identity for most of your adult life, to become, for perhaps the first time since your early 20s, someone who is not defined by a job title. That is genuinely hard. Not financially hard. Existentially hard. And most retirement planning conversations never acknowledge it. Because most retirement planning conversations are about money, not meaning. But here's what becomes true for many people who stay in a job past the point of genuine purpose. They are not there because the work fulfills them. They are there because the work confirms them. It tells them they are still relevant, still needed, still worth something. The salary is no longer the primary reason they show up. The identity validation is. And that psychological need, which is completely understandable, which is in fact deeply human, is being met by the wrong mechanism. Because the identity your career gave you was always borrowed. It was a role. It was a function within a system. It was what you did, not all of who you are. The title was never the person. The company was never the community. The job was never the meaning. It was the container for the meaning. And like any container, it was always meant to be temporary. Here is what the research on retirement satisfaction actually shows. A landmark study published in the Journal of Happiness Studies, tracking retirees over multiple years, found that retirement satisfaction was most strongly predicted not by the size of a retirement portfolio, but by what the researchers called role replacement, the degree to which retirees successfully replaced the psychological functions of work with new structures of purpose, connection, and contribution. The psychological functions of work are specific and worth naming. Work provides structure, a reason to get up, a shape to the day, a sequence of tasks that creates the satisfying feeling of forward motion. Work provides identity, a clear answer to the question of who you are and where you belong. Work provides contribution, the experience of mattering, of your effort having consequence in the world. Work provides social connection, colleagues, context, community. Work provides what psychologists call flow, the state of engaged absorption in a challenging task that is one of the most reliable sources of moment-to-moment well-being. None of these things are owned by employment. They are simply needs that employment happens to meet very efficiently for most of your adult life. The retirees who make this transition well do not try to recreate the structure of work in retirement. They do not treat retirement as an extended vacation that will eventually feel normal. They build a new structure, one built around their own choices rather than an employer's schedule. They mentor, not because an organization assigned them a mentee, but because they chose to bring the accumulated knowledge of a 40-year career to someone who is standing where they once stood. That choice carries a dignity and a freedom that employment-based mentoring never did. They teach, community colleges, continuing education programs, online courses, neighborhood skill sharing groups. The knowledge you built over decades does not retire when you do. And the act of transmitting it, of watching understanding form in someone else's mind, is genuinely satisfying in a way that is hard to replicate. They serve their community in ways their working schedule never permitted. The volunteer board that needs someone with your financial background. The local school that could use someone who knows how to build things. The nonprofit that needs a person who understands how organizations actually work. These organizations have been waiting for people like you, and you have been too busy. They become grandparents in the full sense of the word. Not the occasional visit, the holiday presents, the catch-up call. Present, available, unhurried. There's an irreplaceable quality to a grandparent who has time, who can sit on the floor and play for an hour without glancing at a phone, who can drive a grandchild to practice without it being a logistical crisis, who can be the steady, available presence that working parents genuinely cannot always be. That version of grandparenthood is only available after you let go of the schedule that prevented it. They pursue the thing they always said they would do when they had the time. And they discover, sometimes with genuine surprise, sometimes with an emotion closer to grief for years not given to it sooner, that the thing is better than the job ever was. A retired engineer who finally writes the novel he described for 30 years, a former executive who learns to paint with the discipline she once brought to quarterly earnings, a lifelong corporate attorney who discovers that the thing he actually loves is building furniture in a workshop, solving the puzzle of wood and joint and form. These are not consolation prizes. They are the real prizes, the ones the job years were too full to claim. Letting go of a work identity is not the same as letting go of who you are. It is not retirement. It is not ending. It is making space, deliberate, chosen, hard-earned space, for the parts of you that the job never had room for. You have been an employee, a professional, a producer, a solver, a builder, a fixer. You have been excellent at things that mattered and that needed to be done. Retirement is your first real chance to be whatever you decide, not whatever the job required, whatever you actually want. And the only thing standing between you and that version of yourself is the willingness to put down something that once defined you, but no longer has to. Let me bring this together. Retirement is not about owning the most. It never was. It is about protecting the three things that actually make a retirement good: your time, your money, and your peace of mind. An oversized house full of empty rooms drains all three simultaneously. It costs you the money in maintenance, taxes, and utilities, often $20,000 or more per year, while consuming the weekends and mental bandwidth that retirement was supposed to reclaim. A second car sitting in the driveway costs close to $12,000 a year in total ownership expenses, money that no longer has a commute to justify it. Expensive toys kept out of sentiment rather than genuine use charge you a premium of thousands of dollars per year for the privilege of owning your past, while someone else could be living the dream those things represent. Financial support that exceeds what you can genuinely afford to give trades your future security for a short-term rescue that may not be necessary and may not even be helping in the ways you intend. And a work identity you refuse to release keeps you from becoming the person that retirement was always supposed to free. None of these decisions are easy. None of them should be made impulsively or without care. Some of them will require conversations that are uncomfortable and long overdue. Use the three questions. Does this still serve my new life, or only my old one? What is it truly costing me in full, honest accounting? What becomes possible if I let it go? And then trust your honest answers. Because here is what the research, the data, and the stories of retirees who got this right consistently point toward. The weight you carry into retirement determines the speed at which you move through it. The lighter you travel, the further you go. The more you keep what no longer serves you, the more your retirement becomes about maintaining a past instead of living a present. Freedom in retirement does not arrive automatically. It is not delivered by a social security check or a portfolio milestone. It is built, one clear, honest, chosen decision at a time. The people who find it are the ones who were willing to ask the hard questions before the decisions were made for them by time, by health, by financial necessity, or by circumstances beyond their control. You have time to ask those questions now. You have the information to run the numbers. You have the wisdom, accumulated over decades, to know the difference between what you need and what you have simply stopped noticing you no longer need. Use all of it. Before you go, I want to ask you one thing. Drop a comment below and tell me, what is one thing in your life right now that you know, if you're honest with yourself, you should probably let go of before or during retirement? It does not have to be on this list. It might be something completely different. A habit, a relationship dynamic, a financial obligation, a version of yourself that you have been afraid to finally close the door on. It might be the house that is too big and the truth you have been avoiding. It might be the boat that represents a dream you are still trying to honor even though the dream has changed. It might be the career identity you have been protecting because not knowing who you are without it is genuinely terrifying. Whatever it is, naming it out loud is often the first real step toward letting it go. I read every comment, and what you share might be exactly what someone else watching this needed to hear today. If this video gave you something useful, subscribe. The next video in this series examines the Social Security decision that the majority of Americans get wrong, comparing what you actually receive at 62, 67, and 70, and showing you the one calculation that changes the entire retirement timeline.